Hello, my name is Gideon Chasey, and this is my Tactical 2 documentary. So, World War II and its history. I'm going to be talking about World War II because that was the war my veteran was in. So, why did World War II happen? Well, one of the major reasons or causes of World War II was the Treaty of Versailles, which ironically was the treaty that ended the war before it. Now, in this treaty, one of the terms was that Germany had to take full responsibility for the war, and more than that, they had to pay for it. And so, since they had to pay for it, Germany had no money. They went into this huge depression, and this depression created an atmosphere where Hitler could rise to power because they were desperate people that needed hope, and Hitler had a campaign that was designed around nationalism and making Germany great again. And Hitler himself, his plans for Germany, he wanted it to be like this world power. He wanted to expand it, take land that he thought rightfully belonged to Germany, and he blamed a lot of Germany's problems on the Jews. So that's a little bit of like why World War II was happening. Next, I'm going to talk about like some just like overall like points of like things that happened in the war. So first, September 1st, 1939, when Germany invaded Poland, this is the moment where most people like agree that like this is when World War II started. Hitler invading Poland. After that, Britain and France, they immediately declared war September 3rd. Like 2 days later, they were on it. Then Italy declared war on Britain and France. Italy had a alliance with Germany, and so Italy jumps in the war to have Germany's back. Yeah. After that, Germany conquers France. Germany invades Russia. And then the next major event is Pearl Harbor. Pearl Harbor was the whole reason America even got into the war, because America was trying to like stay away from it. This was all happening in Europe. They were hoping Europe would figure it out. But Pearl Harbor, when Japan bombed the Pearl Harbor base, this was obviously an attack on America. So they didn't want to just ignore it. They had to address it, and they became involved in the war. So yeah, U.S. declares war on Japan. Next, there was the Wannsee Conference. This conference was a meeting between Hitler and major Nazi officials to decide what they were going to do with the Jews. As I said before, that was like one of Hitler's little pet peeves, was the Jews in Germany and in Europe. Any country that he inhabited, he wanted the Jews out of it. And so this conference was where they discussed and came up with the internment camps and concentration camps. Next, May 7th, there was Germany's surrender. On August 6th and 9th, U.S. dropped atomic bombs on Japan, and then September 2nd, Japan surrenders and the war is over. So that's just like a main point overview of just what was going on in the war. Okay. Next, World War II statistics. So human cost, around 400,000 deaths for America. Yeah, that's not any of the other countries, it's just America. And then the impact on America. So one thing the war did, there was a huge nationalism ride. People were, they were proud to be American at the time. And there were job opportunities for African Americans. Honestly, World War II for African Americans kind of felt like how World War I was for women. There were a lot more jobs, and people were becoming like, not everyone, but people I think were starting to see that like African Americans are just as capable and can do the jobs even when the white men are back, if that makes sense. It also helped with the Great Depression. Right before World War II, we were in our depression, and having the economy focused on like war stuff helped it a lot. Slide, okay. Now I'm going to be talking about my veteran who served in World War II, named Joseph Walter Acevedo. history. One thing I thought was actually really cool, he was not an American citizen or born in the United States. I don't know why. I kind of always just thought that was like a requirement to serve in the military, that you had to be born here. I don't know why that is. Maybe I think because if you want to be president, you have to be born here, but I thought the military was also like that. But no, he was born in Michoacán, Mexico, and his uncle was here, and his family had like friends up here, so they wanted to come to America. He was only 2, and they moved into Los Angeles. He was drafted in the Navy. He was 18 when that happened, and he was still in high school when they like told him he was going to get drafted, but because he was in his senior year, they let him finish it before he actually got like sent away. And he attended boot camp and torpedo school in San Diego, and he was stationed in San Francisco. His company traveled to New Guinea and then later to Australia, and he was stationed in Australia when the war ended. He was married to his wife Beatrix in 1946, and they were married for 64 years, which they didn't get like a divorce. He died. That's when their marriage ended, but they were married for 64 years, and they had 4 children together, and he became a U.S. citizen in 1948. He worked for the city of Los Angeles as a mechanic, and he was unanimously elected as the San Dimas, California Senator Citizen year of 2005. So that was exciting. Service records. So I don't have a personal relationship with this veteran. I got him from the website, and they didn't have any of his service records, like documentation. Like, he was drafted, so he would have had like a draft card. It didn't have any of that as like public information, so I have his stats. So war or conflict, he was in World War II, as I stated, and the war was from 1939 to 1945. His military status, he was a veteran. Date of service, 1943 to 1945. Entrance into service, he was drafted. Branch of service, he served in the Navy. Unit of service, he was on the U.S. Uriel and the U.S. Clytie. And location of service, San Diego, California, New Guinea, Australia. And his highest rank was torpedo man mate, 3rd class. And he was never a prisoner of war. Next, service record, part 2. This is where I'm just talking very briefly about like what they did in service. I'm gonna go way more in depth into it in the interviewing section, so I didn't want to be redundant. So this is just some like overview. He attended boot camp and torpedo school. He was stationed in San Diego. There he worked on the ship. He was just like swabbing the decks. When he served in New Guinea, that's when he was doing torpedo stuff with the torpedoes, and then he was sent to Australia because of an injury, but I'll get more into that in a second. Okay, the interview. Okay, so why did they join, and why did they see at the time as the benefits and risk of service? So he was drafted when he was 18, right after he graduated. So he's like, was a really young guy, and he was really inspired by Pearl Harbor. So he was officially drafted, but like he was going to wait till he graduated, and then he was going to enlist anyway. So it was like kind of like the opposite of you can't fire me if I quit. It was like he really wanted to be in the military, but he wanted to wait. So he was like, they were like, we want you to come now, and he was like, oh, I was gonna come anyway. So it didn't really matter. He was excited to go, and he asked to be in the Navy. When you're drafted, I guess you don't get to pick, but you can ask. So it's more of a like, hey, I'd like to do this, but that doesn't exactly mean you're going to get it. But he actually asked to be in the Navy, and they gave it to him. So he was really excited about that. And he didn't really ever talk about the risks. He just seemed really excited and happy to serve his country. Next question, question B. What was their training like, and did they receive specialized training? Okay. In boot camp, he talked a lot about how he got to meet a lot of people. You can tell he's a really like friendly and sociable guy. He did receive some specialized training. He took an altitude test, and he was really good at listening to like underwater sounds and stuff. So he did well in his test, and I guess that put him on like the radar of some of his like commanders. He said he wasn't really sure if he was, he knew he was doing good, and his officials were excited for him, but the job that they ended up getting, he didn't actually think he was like perfect for it. He was just kind of the best they had, if that makes sense. They needed a torpedo guy, and he was like kind of buff, so they were like, I guess he'll work for it. So he got a pretty good job, but he didn't feel like he was a good fit for it. But so he got specialized training, torpedo school. Next question C. What was their service like? Such as what was their jobs and what type of things did they do? So he didn't talk in depth about what he was doing, but most of it was just regular boat maintenance and taking care of the ship that he was on. After torpedo school, he went to San Francisco, and they were working at the Gate Bridge. He did say he was a little scared while he was there because it being the Golden Gate Bridge, they thought that there might be another attack or something. They were afraid there might be another attacker. It was just because it's like a well-known American establishment. They thought that there was like danger there, but he did talk briefly about being scared while he was at the Golden Gate Bridge, and he was in a Bailey flat top carrier. And he talked about how he would sleep on the deck, like under the wings of the airplanes on there. And while he was in New Guinea, he also, there were meal cards that they had to like clock in, and there were different ones. So it's like if you wanted to get lunch food, you had to use this card, dinner food, this food. He only knew how to work the breakfast card, so all he was eating was cereal. And so with a diet of all cereal, he got like really, really skinny. And he had an injury as well. It was a finger injury, and it was like due to like one of his seamen accidentally smashed his finger. So it was like broken, and when it's like the bone is like snapped, and then but still like the skin was intact, but they thought that he might have to get the finger removed, and so he had to leave New Guinea, and he went to Australia. And Australia was kind of like a chilling point. There wasn't a lot of action happening there, so because of his finger injury, he was sent there. All right, next slide. Question D. Did they participate in a war, and what was it like? Well, yeah, he served in World War II, and he served on various carriers and ships. He never served in combat, though, because he was on the ships. But and he was only in New Guinea for 3 months, and then he had the finger injury, and he was sent to like a safe place in Australia. But the ship, if he had stayed on the New Guinea ship, he would have actually have gone to Japan. He said that in the interview, that the ship was supposed to go to Japan. So he like just missed combat for that. And then question E. How did military service impact their views of people in the world? You could really tell, I've said this before, but he seems like a very friendly and sweet guy. He talked a lot about how he met a bunch of different people, and I think military service also gave him that opportunity, like widened the amount of people he would have seen. And it also, I feel like it really made him want to be an American citizen. He talked about how important that was to become an American citizen, and I feel like fighting for his country probably like installed a big part of that like real like need and want for that after service. Okay, next slide. Question F. What was it like coming back to the U.S. or coming back to civilian life? So he was really excited back because he was writing back and forth to his girlfriend at the time, and he wanted to get married. So he was really excited. That's like what he was talking about in the interview, that he was like, war's over. He wanted to go back and see his girl. So, and he wasn't in combat, so he didn't suffer any like mental trauma or issues. So he wasn't traumatized by the war. He was ready to come back to see his girlfriend. Okay, next question. Question G, after service, how did it impact their lives? Did it lead to various jobs/careers? Yeah. So he became a mechanic, like after he came back, and he took a civil service test. Sorry. And he got a higher grade. And part of he said in the interview that he thought his military service helped that as well. And people were they wanted to hire a veteran. That was something that looked good on his resume. So I think it helped him get his job at a mechanic. One negative thing about his service was his service did impact his lungs. And so he complained that they couldn't go to the smoking lounges with his buddies, but that was the only really downside. His lungs weren't that badly impacted. It was just hey, you shouldn't be in a room filled with smoke, if that makes sense. Okay. Next slide is photographs. First I'm gonna show a clip from the interview just to see his degree. And this part I really liked because I feel it really captures how just playful and kind he seems. It's him talking about initiation. Whenever the boat was going to New Guinea and past the equator, they have this initiation in the Navy. So I'm gonna go to that and play that.
But anyway, it paid off on the long run because when we crossed the equator, we got initiated.
You got that little card, right?
Yeah, where you go from a pollywog into a shellback. And I'll tell you that initiation is pretty sometimes. We'd get in a row and they'd paddle us, as we went across there. And then the initiation, we drank from a little bedpan. They didn't tell you what was in it, but it was part of the initiation. And then some big chief had a bare belly out with grease on it, and you had to kiss his greasy belly, and they get you up on the barber chair, and they whack off some of your hair. They really messed it up, and then they dump you backwards into a big tank full of garbage and oil and stuff like that. And as you go down, when you come back up, you have to say shellback real quick, or they'll dunk you again.
Oh wow!
So there was different kinds of
initiation. Did you make it the first time?
Oh yeah, the first time I hollered right
Shell
away.
back.
Yeah, shell back.
Okay, I'm sorry if that was a little quiet, but that was him talking about initiation, and I just really liked how he sounded really happy. Here are some photos of him. The first one all the way to the left is a photo, his Navy photo, then photo of him with a bunch of his fellow seamen. The one of him with his wife, that's them at the 2005 when he was won a Citizen Senior Award, and then the last photo is from his interview. Okay, so now next section, we're going to be talking about the sociological perspective. So was their service typical or atypical? So his service was pretty standard. The only thing I feel that stood out was the fact he had an injury. And it wasn't from combat. Most of the time when someone has a war injury, it's from actual being out there and I don't know, just being out there. But his thing was his buddy accidentally hurt him. So I would say that's atypical. But other than that, I feel his service was pretty standard. He was drafted, you know what I mean? That was a very common thing that was happening at the time. But yeah. I would say he had a pretty standard thing. And then was their life outcomes similar or different to others? So his life outcome was it makes sense for what happened at the war. So I feel there is a lot of bad things that happens to veterans. They have a higher suicide rate. There's a higher unemployment rate when you come back. And a lot of it's because of mental issues or physical disabilities that happen from the war, but luckily for Joseph, he didn't have any of that since he wasn't in combat. His finger it got well over time, you know what I mean? He was good, and he wasn't in combat, so he didn't have any mental things, so he was in good condition. So the outcome of his life are similar to others that didn't have to go through that, in that sense. So his life is different from those who were in combat, but his life was pretty standard for someone who wasn't in combat. That's what I'm trying to say. Okay. And then lastly, how would a sociologist explain this person's life and service? So going through the life course perspective, first step, examining his life over time. So if we look over his life, as I said before, his military service was pretty standard. It made sense. His life outcomes made sense for everything that happened to him. He was drafted like everyone else. He married very young. That was very common for World War II veterans to get married very young. He, like everyone else, got married young. He didn't suffer any mental issues because he wasn't in combat, and he got a tactical blue-collar job. In the book, it said that was also like a very common thing. World War II vets that were like successful and had like good lives, when they came back, they either went to college or got like a blue-collar job training. Like he had some like after-war job training, and he did that. So examining his life, he had a pretty like good and standard like life and service. Two, some historical like context. The things that I noted that would like make him stand out, I guess, was the fact that he was like Hispanic. So he was a part of like a minority, and he wasn't rich by any means. He was in a lower to like middle class person. Like he had a blue collar job. He was definitely part of the working class. And last, compare experiences with individuals with the same background. His experiences were good. He got along with everyone he talked to. It seemed like there didn't seem to be any, if there were, he didn't express having any negative experiences due to him being Hispanic or having any issues with that. So I would say, going back to the main question, how a sociologist would explain this person's life and service, I would believe that they would say that his service was very good, and he was lucky, if that makes sense. Like, there are a lot of bad things and bad outcomes and kind of like sad like stories from World War II, and Joseph is very lucky to not be one of those people. So a sociologist would say that the war effects on him were very minimum, and that it makes sense that he was able to come back and adjust and live his life normally. So yeah, thank you very much for listening to my presentation, and here are the credits.